Hello and welcome to the Bhagavatam. We come to this world vibrant, alive, and full of joy as children. And as children, we do not overthink or hold on to emotions or grudges. We feel deeply, intensely, passionately, and then it's over. You've seen it many a time, I'm sure. A child crying. They'll cry loud. They'll be full. Their whole body will move as they passionately let out their laughter or their tears. And when it's over, it's over. They're not holding it against you. They're not holding any grudges. They're not remembering the whole story of what you did before and what you might do again. No, they're back to being a child. That's the amazing part about kids, and we love it. What wisdom does a child have? What do they know about life that we don't? And what can they teach us? I've often said to people who wanted to learn about parenting when I did workshops and seminars, and I would tell them that you think you're here to teach your kids, but actually your kids are your teachers. They've come to teach you how to live, something that we've all forgotten. They've come to teach you how to be alive. They've come to teach you who you are. Today we're going to examine the wisdom of a 5-year-old Prahlad, a young boy in ancient times. He was highly evolved. He thought of no one as a friend or enemy, better or worse, and he loved God. His father, on the other hand, was a powerful king, an atheist who hated God and who tried to brainwash his son, but to no avail. Finally, he tried to kill his son when he saw that he couldn't transform him, when he couldn't make his son like him. He couldn't turn his son away from God. He got so fed up because he himself, he was against his values, his belief system. And so he really tried everything. But no matter what he did, threw him off a cliff, he threw him into a nest of snakes, had him pierced with sharp daggers, threw him into burning oil, but nothing worked. Prahlad was fearless. He trusted God. And he went into deep meditation or samadhi. Consequently, nothing his father did could harm even a hair on his head. What was Prahlad's superpower? Where did he get it? What can we learn from him about being fearless? Join us as we explore some of these topics through the ancient wisdom of the Vedas, revealed to us by the wisest people who ever lived on this planet. So in the earlier episodes, we talked about his father, Prahlad, the young boy Prahlad's father, Hiranyakashipu. And Hiranyakashipu was, well, I don't want to go into the whole story now, but he did some very powerful mystical practices, mystical meditations in yoga. And through that, he gained immense power. I think just to recap for you, I'll put up some of the slides that we had. Pictures of this intense kind of meditations that he was doing, standing on his toes and reaching his hands up and praying in a way that would finally, he just got, the entire universe was disturbed by his intensity. And then Brahma came to see what was going on because Hiranyakashipu's entire body had turned into an anthill. He'd been devoured by ants in the midst of his meditation. So Brahma came and sprinkled some of his magical, mystical water on Hiranyakashipu, and the body of Hiranyakashipu was revived. At which point, Brahma asked Hiranyakashipu what is it he wanted, and why was he doing this intense kind of meditation. And then Hiranyakashipu told him all the different conditions he had. He didn't want to die either by man or by beast, or by on the land or on the air, inside or outside the house. He did not want to die under so many different conditions. He was trying to become immortal, which is not possible. Even Brahma could not give him that boon. But he tried every other possible way to ask for the same thing. And ultimately, Brahma had to concede, because this guy was so powerful in his practice that he was going to upset the balance of things in the universe. So Brahma said to him, okay, Hiranyakashipu, these benedictions for which you're asking are difficult to obtain for almost anyone, but I shall grant them to you, although they are generally not available. Then Brahma departed. Hiranyakashipu, having thus been blessed by Brahma and having acquired a lustrous golden body, continued to remember the death of his brother. See, he was very, very angry because his brother had been killed by Vishnu. Vishnu is a name for the Supreme Being or God. And Vishnu had killed Hiranyakashipu's brother because, again, his brother was another demonic character who had created great havoc all across the universe. He's very powerful. But eventually he had to be killed. And now the brother Hiranyakashipu is like really mad, and that's why he did all this austerity to gain power. And with that power, now he wanted to kill Vishnu. So as he continued to remember the death of his brother and be angry, you know how it is when you're mad at somebody and you're resentful and you're angry, you keep on remembering that and you're playing back the things that you hate, and you get more and more and more worked up. Ever been there? I've seen lots of people do that. And they get really, really worked up, and to the point where you start saying and doing things that you probably wouldn't have done otherwise. But anyway, Hiranyakashipu, with all his might and all his power, now went on to conquer all the planets in the universe, upper, middle, and lower. In today's time, we want to try to travel to other planets, to the moon, to Mars. And we say there's nothing out there. But the truth is that in the Vedic times, people were traveling. They were traveling all across the universe and the galaxies. But they weren't doing it with mechanical machines like we're doing right now. They had developed the power of the mind to such an extent, the power of spirit to such an extent, that they could literally transport themselves instantly. They didn't have to go at the speed of light. They could travel at the speed of thought. That's how powerful we are. That's what we're capable of doing. If only we would learn to harness the capabilities of this organism that we live in. But we don't. Our energies are all placed upon trying to develop science, technology. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong in that. It's better we develop something than develop nothing. We don't need to stay as nomadic tribes people. We've developed amazing technologies. I love all of that. But the fact of the matter is they're very limited. The kind of technologies that they developed in Vedic times were far more amazing, and they allowed for people to do things that today would seem impossible. It might seem that, that's just a myth. You're just making that up. But hey, try telling somebody 100 years ago about the cell phone you use or about the kind of electric car you drive. Yeah, they'd say that's impossible. That's just, or the computer you use for that matter, They wouldn't believe you. They'd say you're just making it up, right? Of course, you'd have to show them the actual thing. But when thousands of years pass, what do you show them? How can you show them? That thing won't work anymore thousands of years later. These were inner technologies that were developed within. And so there's no hard evidence. There are records of texts which describe what was going on back then. And that's what we're referring to here. So now Hiranyakashipu went on to conquer all the planets in the universe. Remember, he had become indestructible. Nobody could kill him, more or less. And he brought everyone under his power, influence, and control. He now possessed all the opulences in the world, in the universe, and began residing in the most opulent palace of Indra. He had overthrown even the king of the heavenly planets, Indra. And if you Remember, here's a picture of Indra. Yeah. So he'd even taken over Indra's palace. And that palace, which was constructed by Vishwakarma, the architect of the Devas. Devas are the demigods. Okay, keep in mind, when people talk about Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma having millions of gods, they're not talking about the supreme being God. They're talking about devas, demigods. Demigods are people like you and I who become highly evolved beings through their spirituality and now hold positions in which they take care of managing the universe. So that's devas. And then the opposite of the devas are the asuras. Devas are theists. They believe in God and they're there to serve God. But the atheists, the asuras, right, are referred to sometimes as demons, sometimes as asuras. The actual word in Sanskrit is asura, the opposite of a divine being. However you want to take that. The worst of the asuras were known as rakshasas. They were really demonic, right? And this Hiranyakashipu was, I would say, basically in that category. So he had taken over the palace of Indra, which was constructed by Vishwakarma, and around it were the famous Nandan gardens, which were enjoyed by the Devas. The steps of this palace were made of coral. The floor was bedecked with emeralds. The walls were made of crystal, and the columns of Vaidurya stone. The wonderful canopies were beautifully decorated. The seats, the places for sitting, were bedecked with rubies, and silk bedding as white as foam was decorated with pearls. The ladies of the palace were blessed with beautiful smiling faces, and as they walked around, their ankle bells melodiously tinkled. However, they were now all oppressed by Hiranyakashipu. They had to bow down and offer obeisances at his feet while he chastised them severely for no apparent reason. Remember, he was a tyrant. Thus, Hiranyakashipu severely ruled everyone. He was always drunk on strong-smelling wines and liquors, and therefore his coppery eyes were always rolling. Although he was abominable, yet by executing great austerities in mystic yoga, all the demigods except Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu had to worship him with prayers, glorification, and gifts. Now, I want to make it really clear that this is not the intention of yoga. Yoga means union with the divine. However, there is an aspect of yoga, which is about a mystical aspect, which can be misused, as was done over here. And even when it is misused, there are forces that will come and rectify the damage that has been done or the harm that has been done by that person. And that's what happens in this whole narrative. But keep in mind that even good things, good people, can be misused and turned around. Even the best of things can be used for terrible purposes. I mean, a knife, for example, can be used to cut some fruit, but it can also be used to kill someone. So in the same way, anything, right, your computer, your phone, can be used for terrible acts, whether it's by a terrorist or whether it's by a serial killer or whether it's by any kind of person who wants to harm others. The thing in and of itself is neither good nor bad. It's what it's used for. So yoga is a tool, is a technology. And yes, if it is misused, it can be used for something bad as well. That's technology for you. So Hiranyakashipu had achieved the power to control everything in the universe and enjoy his senses as much as possible for a very long time. He was proud of his opulences. However, he was dissatisfied because instead of controlling his senses, he remained their servant. See, keep this in mind. Even the richest person, even the person who has the most beauty, has the greatest power, has the greatest knowledge, they're all controlled by their own senses and by their mind and by their body. Our body tells us it wants something, we do it. Our mind tells us it wants something, we do it. So who is the boss? Who's in charge here? Is it you or is it your body and your mind? We are servants of our body and mind. And unless we learn to exercise our will beyond what the body and mind want, when we understand what our spirit wants, what our soul wants, what God wants, when we understand the higher nature and begin to act according to that, then we become free of this servitude of the body and mind. We no longer follow the commands of this organism that we live in. We're no longer subservient to it. So Hiranyakashipu, although he was so powerful, he was still controlled by his senses and remained their servant. The rulers of the various planets were extremely distressed, fearful, and disturbed due to his punishments. Unable to find any other shelter, they at last surrendered to the supreme Godhead, Vishnu. You know how it is too. Most people won't go to God unless they've got a real problem, right? And then they'll, oh my God, I've got to go to the temple. I got to go to the church. I got to go somewhere and pray to God. You know, I need help. Help me. But when things are going good, they're complacent. We don't think of God then, unless you train yourself, because then you don't need to have troubles. You don't need to have problems. If the problems are what's going to bring you to God, then you're probably going to have lots of problems. But if you go to God without the need for all those problems, then perhaps you won't have as many. I've seen in my own life that the more you trust and depend on God, the more you have that trust in that there is someone there who loves you and cares for you and has your back, the safer you feel in the world, and the more likely you are to be at peace and to be taken care of, and for less likely for horrible things to keep happening because they're not necessary anymore. So as they called on the Supreme Godhead, Vishnu, the Supreme Being, or it's commonly called God, but we try to kind of stay away from that word a bit, there appeared before them a transcendental sound emanating from, like thunder from the sky. And it seemed to be a personality who was not visible to their eyes. The voice was grave and encouraging, driving away all fear. I've come across some people who've heard voices, some of them even known to be great prophets and so on, and those voices were scary. And if you're hearing scary voices, they're not the voice of God. I tell you that right now. And if they bring fear, they're not the voice of God. And if they bring you talk of punishment and damnation and all that kind of talk, they're not the voice of God. It says very clearly here, the voice was grave, as in serious, and encouraging. And it drove away all fear. They became fearless just by hearing it. That is the nature. When you feel that presence of God, you know you feel safe. You feel that fear disappears, anxiety disappears, depression disappears, and you just feel good for no reason at all. And the voice said, "O best of learned persons, do not fear. I wish all good fortune to you. Become my devotees." This is Vishnu talking. "Become my devotees by hearing and chanting about me and offering me prayers. For these are certainly meant to award benedictions for all living entities." Now, it's an important point here as well. He's not asking that you need to hear and chant about me and offer me prayers because that's somehow going to fatten my ego and make me feel great. No. He's saying because these activities will award benedictions to all living entities. They will bless you. How will they bless you? With inner peace, with spiritual growth, with a sense of being uplifted from your problems and rising to a higher level or a higher vibration. So he says, "I know all about the activities of Hiranyakashipu and shall surely stop them very soon. Please wait patiently until that time." When one is envious of the devas or demigods, the Vedas, the cows, Brahmins, Vaishnavas, and Dharma, and ultimately of me, the Supreme Godhead, he and his civilization will be vanquished without delay. Listen to this again. When one is envious of the Devas, the Vedas. The Vedas are the books of knowledge. The Devas are the demigods. The cows, the Brahmins, the priests, the Vaishnavas, the devotees of God, and Dharma. Dharma is the path of how we need to live in this world. And ultimately of God, of me, the Supreme Godhead. He and that person and his civilization will be vanquished without delay. When Hiranyakashipu torments his son Prahlad, who is a great devotee and has no enemy, I shall kill Hiranyakashipu immediately, despite the benedictions of Brahma. See, he's going to override the benedictions of Brahma. He's going to find a way out to kill Hiranyakashipu. Because tyrants like that do not deserve to live. Just as much as Hitler did not deserve to be lived. He had to be vanquished. Just as much as anyone who has been that kind of personality has to be vanquished. That's been happening since the beginning of time. Whenever such demonic characters, such tyrants have existed, they have been vanquished, always. When the Supreme Being Vishnu reassured the Devas, the demigods, they were comforted and confident that the end of Hiranyakashipu was near. Hiranyakashipu had 4 sons, of whom Prahlad was a pure, unalloyed devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Let's talk about this word, unalloyed. So an alloy is when you mix things up, right? When you have gold and you mix it with, let's say, brass, then you can have an alloy. I'm not sure exactly what they mix, but I think it might be brass because it looks like gold. So when you mix 2 metals, you have an alloy. But an unalloyed devotee or an unalloyed substance is like pure gold, 24 karat gold. So Prahlad, this young boy of 5 years old, was a pure, unalloyed devotee, meaning he was not contaminated by anything material, as we'll now read. He was a pure devotee of God. He had all Brahminical qualities, the qualities of a highly evolved being. He had good character, the understanding of the absolute truth, control of his senses and mind. He was kind to every living entity and the best friend of everyone. He served those who were elder and respectable. He was like a father to the poor and was like a sympathetic brother to his equals or his friends. He revered his teachers and gurus as he did God. He was completely free from the pride that might have arisen from his good education, riches, beauty, and aristocracy. So a question could be asked, how come Prahlad was born like this? I mean, he was only 5 years old, so he hadn't, been contaminated by his father and his father's ways. This is called sanskar. Sanskar means that he was born with this attitude. This sanskar was not given to him by his father, clearly, who was a very demonic person, a very atheistic person. But this is something he had accumulated in his past life. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that whatever spiritual progress we make in our life is never lost and goes with us into future lives. So your spiritual progress is your eternal wealth, the growth you make. It's not about the things you learn. It's not about the things you know. It's about the inner progress that you make. You can hear about the qualities of Prahlad and you'll understand from those qualities. If you have any of those qualities are the result of your past lives. They're spontaneously there. Unless you've cultivated them in this life, that's a different thing. But even the seeking to cultivate them is driven by a long chain of events that goes from one life to another. If you are here seeking this knowledge, learning these things, you've been doing it for a long time. It's not often that a person just spontaneously, suddenly turns around and decides to be spiritual or on this path. It's something they've been pursuing for many lifetimes or avoiding sometimes. And then finally they come to their senses and like, okay, come on, I just got to get, with the program. I got to find out the truth. I got to find out who I am and why I'm here. So although Prahlad was born in a family of asuras, or demonic people, or atheists, he was a great devotee of Vishnu, of God, of the Supreme Being. Unlike the asuras, he was never envious of Vaishnavas, devotees of Vishnu. He was not agitated when put into danger and was uninterested in karmic activities. He considered material things to be useless. He always controlled his senses, and being of steady intelligence and determination, he subdued all material desires. See, these are all symptoms of a highly evolved being. A lot of times we find that people come into the New Age or any of these other kind of spiritual movements, but there's no standard. There's no idea of what is a highly evolved being. The Vedas, and the Bhagavatam specifically, even the Bhagavad Gita, talk very clearly about what the symptoms are of a highly evolved being. All of these qualities that we just read about Prahlad explain to us and show us what a highly evolved being is like. And then we'll go further to see his actions, and you'll begin to understand it even further. Because it's not enough to just, it's not about, listing a bunch of qualities, but hey, how do you apply them? Do they really work? Are you able to walk your talk? Are you able to live that which you believe? Because see, belief means nothing. Faith, belief, they're just beginning level. After that, you've got to develop those godly qualities, those highly evolved qualities. And you don't just develop them one by one by one. It's not like that. You develop your own spiritual awareness. You go past your mind and you connect with the soul. And you allow that soul to connect with the divine or God. And that grace, as it pours into you, transforms you. And as it transforms you, then all these qualities begin to show up. It's like taking a diamond and polishing it, shining it. It already has that shine within it, but it's been crusted with all kinds of dirt and rock and what have you. And then as they take all that off, the pure diamond begins to shine. So this is a path of cleansing, a path of clearing out the anarthas, the things that are blocking our true spiritual nature from showing and shining through. Prahlad had unflinching faith in the Supreme Godhead, Vasudeva, also known as Vasudeva, Narayan, Krishna, Vishnu, many names, an unalloyed devotion to him. His attachment to Krishna was natural because of his previous devotional service, meaning in his previous lifetimes. Devotional service meaning bhakti, devotion, love of God. Although his good qualities are innumerable, they prove that he was a great soul, a Mahatma. From the very beginning of his childhood, Prahlad was uninterested in childish playthings, and he remained silent and dull, being fully absorbed in God consciousness or Krishna consciousness. He could not understand how the world goes on being fully absorbed in the activities of sense gratification. I remember being a teenager and feeling that way too. I said, I don't know why people do the things they do. Why is the world the way it is? Why are people chasing all these things? Because in the end, we're going to die and leave it all behind. So does it matter? Does any of it matter? There's got to be a deeper meaning to life. Prahlad was always absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. Because of his spiritual advancement, he sometimes cried, sometimes laughed, sometimes expressed jubilation, and sometimes sang loudly. He, by the way, these are the symptoms of an ecstatic, highly evolved soul. Someone who has deep love of God. These are the symptoms of love of God. There is this spontaneous tears that come, spontaneous laughter, spontaneous jubilation, spontaneous singing and glorification of God. Now, in this world, for the mind, there always has to be a reason to be happy. Oh, it's your birthday, let's be happy. Oh, I got a raise. Oh, I got, something. Reason to be happy, reason to celebrate. But not so for one who is spiritually advanced. There is no cause, there is no reason for their joy and ecstasy. It erupts from within, and it's constant, and it keeps on happening like waves. You come across this in the life of Chaitanya, and here in the case of Prahlad. Sometimes Prahlad felt that Krishna was far away. So when feeling that God is far away from me, and he would anxiously call for him in a loud voice. At times he saw Krishna near him and lost his shyness. Then in jubilation he would dance in ecstasy, being fully absorbed in thoughts of God. He felt oneness and imitated the pastimes of the Lord. Sometimes feeling the touch of Krishna's lotus hands upon him, he became spiritually jubilant and remained silent, his hair standing on end and tears gliding down his half-closed eyes because of his love for God. Prahlad was constantly engaged in devotional activities. By seeing his bodily features when he was in ecstasy, his friends who were born in families of asuras, demonic families or atheistic families, they became purified. Just by seeing him, they became purified and experienced transcendental bliss. When you're around people like that, their energy is palpable. Their vibration is deep, and you get swept into it. I've come across people like that. It is powerful to be in their presence. Now, Hiranyakashipu, the father, tormented this exalted, fortunate devotee, although Prahlad was his son. Srila Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavatam, he says, a devotee is never contaminated by material conditions, but persons subjected to material conditions can become spiritually advanced and blissful upon seeing the behavior of a pure devotee. So you see, his energy is infectious. The person who is that pure lover of God, that pure devotee, his energy is infectious. And one who comes into that vibration, into that energy, it's like it's like you're putting iron into fire, and then that iron becomes like fire, it becomes red hot. The devotee himself is never contaminated by material conditions. At this point, because this whole narrative is being spoken by Narad, the great sage Narad, he's been speaking it to King Yudhishthir, and the king inquires from Narad. He says, well, why did Hiranyakashipu give so much trouble to the pure and exalted Prahlad, who was his own son? A father and mother are always affectionate to their children. When the children are disobedient, the parents chastise them, but not due to enmity, only for the child's instruction and welfare. Why would Hiranyakashipu be so violent towards an exalted son who was obedient, well-behaved, and respectful to his father? He asks Narad, the sage, he says, "O master, I have never heard of such a contradiction as an affectionate father punishing his noble son with the intention of killing him. Kindly dissipate our doubts in this regard." So Narad then begins to explain. He says, the Asuras headed by Hiranyakashipu accepted Shukracharya as their priest. Shukracharya had two sons, Shanda and Amarka. So now he's going deeper into the story of Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad, his son. Hiranyakashipu sent Prahlad to the school of Shukracharya's sons to be educated. Prahlad was taught politics and economics by his teachers. When he heard the political philosophy involves considering someone a friend and someone else an enemy, Prahlad did not like it. Why? Because he was samadrishti, meaning he saw everyone as the same. There's no friend, there's no enemy, there's no one who's better, there's no one who's worse. That's the signs of a highly evolved being. One day Hiranyakashipu, the father, affectionately placed his son Prahlad on his lap and asked him, "Son, what is the best of all the subjects you have been studying from your teachers?" Prahlad replied, "O best of the Asuras, king of the demons, as far as I have learned from my guru, any person who has accepted a temporary body and temporary household life is certainly embarrassed by anxiety because of having fallen in a deep, dark well where there is no water but only suffering. One should give up this position and go to the forest and take shelter of the Supreme Godhead, Hari." So he's talking about material life. He's talking about how it entraps you, and it's like falling into a deep, dark well that is very hard to get out of. We all get entangled in the affairs of our life, and the problems that we have, and then we get, we think, oh, this is all there is. I've got to survive. I've got to struggle. I've got to make a living. I've got to go to work. And Prahlad's offering a different possibility. When Prahlad spoke about the path of self-realization in bhakti, in devotional service, Hiranyakashipu laughingly replied. His father said, "This is the intelligence of children spoiled by the words of the enemy." Now remember, for him, for Hiranyakashipu, the father, God was his enemy. Vishnu was his enemy. So he ordered his assistants to give complete protection to this boy so that his intelligence could not be further influenced by these god people, the Vaishnavas, the followers of Vishnu, who may go there in disguise. Prahlad was sent back to school, to the Gurukul, and there his teachers, with mild voices and affectionate words, tried to find out what had happened. So they wanted to get the truth out of him. You know how sometimes they do, detectives will try to do that, or someone who's an interrogator will do that. They started quizzing him. They said, "Dear son Prahlad, these boys you see, they're not like you, for they do not speak in a deviant way. How have you learned these instructions? How has your intelligence been spoiled in this way? Has this pollution of your intelligence been brought about by you or by the enemies? We are all your teachers and are very eager to hear about this. Kindly do not speak lies to us. Just tell us the truth." Prahlad begins offering his respects to Bhagavan, the Supreme Being. And he says, that Supreme Being whose illusory energy has created this world has also created that illusory energy, that Maya, or some people in modern times call it the matrix, has created the distinctions of my friend and my enemy by deluding the intelligence of men. Indeed, I am now actually experiencing, although I had previously heard about it. By the grace of the Supreme Being, one becomes a pandit, a learned person, and does not make distinction between enemies, friends, and himself. Intelligently, he then thinks every one of us is an eternal servant of God, and therefore we are not different from one another. Persons who always think in terms of enemy and friend are unable to realize the presence of Paramatma, the Supersoul, within themselves. See, when we understand that God lies within every one of us, that we are all particles of the same divine being, then what I see in me, I see in you. But most people don't even see what lies within themselves. They do not see their own divinity. So how can they see the divinity in others? They may say words like namaste or this or that, as it happens in yoga schools. But that doesn't mean they see or feel or experience that divinity themselves. And if they do, then the symptom of that would be they'd recognize that same presence in the other. And therefore they would never think ill of another or judge them. The point is, unfortunately, we judge ourselves, what to say of others. We speak ill of ourselves, what to say of others. And that divinity is not just present in people. It's present in the animals, it's present in the plants, it's present everywhere. That God, that Supreme Being is present everywhere, in everything, in everyone. The same Supreme Godhead who has created this illusion has given me the intelligence to take the side of your so-called enemy. And then he gives a very interesting example. He says, as iron attracted by a magnet automatically moves towards it, my consciousness, having been changed by his will, is attracted by Vishnu, who carries a disc in his hand. I have no independence. You see, there are those of us who are drawn to money. We're drawn towards fame. We're drawn towards wanting to look good. But where is that draw? What is drawing us? What is pulling us? It's the ego. And then there are those who've begun to understand that I'm not this mind, I'm not this body, I'm not the ego. I'm a spiritual being. And they, as they start to grow and evolve, become drawn towards that divine being that is behind the energy of the world. The energy is also God. The presence within all of us is also God. But there is a being behind all of that who has form, who's not just formless. So he says, I am helplessly being drawn, like an iron is drawn towards a magnet. I am drawn towards the divine, towards the supreme being. At this point, Prahlad's teacher, Sanda and Amarka, the sons of Shukracharya, became angry at him. Bring me a stick, they said. This Prahlad is damaging our name and fame. Because of his bad intelligence, he has become like a cinder in the dynasty of the Asuras, the demons. He needs to be beaten. They chastised and threatened Prahlad in many ways. They taught him the worldly paths of religion, economic development, and sense gratification. Finally, they had him dressed nicely and brought before his father. They thought they'd transformed him. They thought they'd brainwashed him enough. Prahlad fell at the feet of his father and offered respects, obeisances. Hiranyakashipu responded as an affectionate father by showering blessings upon the child and with great joy embraced his son. See, he thought his son had been transformed, so now he's very happy. He then seated Prahlad on his lap and began smelling his head, a sign of affection. With affectionate tears gliding down from his eyes and moistening the child's smiling face, he spoke to his son as follows: My dear Prahlad, my dear son, for so much time you have heard many things from your teachers. Now please repeat to me whatever you think is the best of that knowledge. Oh boy, was he in for a surprise. Prahlad started off. Shravanam kirtanam Vishnu smaranam padasevanam archanam vandanam dasyam sakhyam atma nivedanam. He started repeating what he'd heard from his guru, Narad. And the meaning of those words is hearing and chanting about the transcendental holy name, form, qualities, and pastimes of Vishnu, remembering them, serving his lotus feet, offering him respectful worship, offering him prayers, becoming his servant, considering him to be one's best friend, and surrendering everything, body, mind, and words, unto him. These 9 processes are accepted as pure bhakti or devotional service. So these are the ways in which we serve God or love God. We show that. Just like when you love someone, you do something for them. It's not just, oh, I have faith in you or I believe in you. No. You actually do something for that person. You might cook something for them, or you might buy them something, or you might serve them in some way. And that's how you demonstrate and you exhibit your love for them. Yes, your words are one of those things. So therefore he says hearing and chanting, hearing and speaking about the transcendental holy name of God, about his form, about God's qualities and pastimes. Remembering them. So Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam. Then serving his lotus feet, Pada Sevanam. Offering him respectful worship, offering him prayers, becoming his servant, considering it to be one's best friend, and surrendering everything, body, mind, and words, unto him. These 9 processes are accepted as pure devotional service. A lot of us don't want to do any of that. We want to be worshipped. We want to be looked up to. We want someone who will do all this for us. That's the ego. That's where we want to be God. So if you're wanting someone to do all of this for you, then you're on the path where you want to be God. Please recognize that. And letting go of that and recognizing that there is a supreme being and I need to devote my energies towards that. That is the path of devotion, of bhakti, of pure love. Then he says, one who has dedicated his life to the service of Krishna through these 9 methods should be understood to be the most learned person, for he has acquired complete knowledge. On hearing these words, Hiranyakashipu became extremely angry and told his son's teachers, O unqualified, heinous sons of a Brahmin, you have disobeyed my order and taken shelter of my enemies. You have taught this poor boy about devotion to Vishnu. What is this nonsense? And the teacher said, "O king, whatever your son Prahlad has said was not taught to him by us. Devotion for Vishnu has spontaneously developed in him. Therefore, please give up your anger and do not unnecessarily accuse us." Hiranyakashipu told Prahlad, "You rascal, most fallen of our family, if you have not received this education from your teachers, where have you gotten it?" Prahlad replied, "Because of their uncontrolled senses, persons too addicted to materialistic life make progress towards hellish conditions and repeatedly chew that which has already been chewed." So he's giving the analogy of like a cow who, will eat some grass, and then you know how it is. I don't know if you're aware of this. The cow will swallow that grass and then bring it up and continue chewing it. So while it's out grazing, it will keep on and on and on chewing, but it hasn't digested it yet. So we too keep on chewing the chewed. That is to say, we keep on trying to enjoy our senses, and those senses give us pleasure for a few moments. And then again, we have to do it again and again and again and again. So whether it's food or it's sex or it's anything else, the pleasure we derive from our senses is not lasting, and it requires great endeavor, and it requires us to do something or other. Maybe it's about having a partner. Maybe it's about having to work. Maybe it's about having to cook. Maybe it's about having to do a whole lot of things. But the joy that comes from within, that requires no effort. So he says, persons who have uncontrolled senses, their inclinations towards God, towards Krishna, are never aroused, either by the instructions of others, by their own efforts, or by a combination of both. Persons who are strongly entrapped by the consciousness of enjoying material life, and who have therefore accepted as their leader a blind person attached to external sense objects, cannot understand that the goal of life is to engage in the service of Vishnu and return home back to Godhead. As blind men, guided by another blind man, miss the right path and fall into a ditch, materially attached people led by other materially attached people are bound by the ropes of karmic labor, which are made of very strong cords, and they continue again and again in materialistic life, suffering material miseries. By the way, if you're having any thoughts or questions, please write them down in the text. I will take up all your questions later on. So don't hesitate to keep writing. I am definitely going to answer your questions. I'm looking forward to it. So please. Persons very much inclined towards materialistic life must surrender to a devotee of God, a Vaishnava, who is completely freed from material contamination. For only by doing so will they be able to take shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord and be freed from material contamination. So why is this? Why can't we just approach God directly? Why do you need to go to someone who is a devotee of God? There's a clear indicator here. He says one must surrender to a Vaishnava or devotee of God who is completely freed from material contamination. This is vital because there are many who are on the path, but they are not completely freed from material contamination. I'm not freed from material contamination. And I know most others who are on the path are not. So don't expect them to be able to liberate you. You have to find someone who is highly evolved on this path. And they are there. And they can then, if you take shelter of them, they can guide you because they have direct experience of the Supreme Being, Krishna. And they can bring you into that place of love of God. Just like the person who translated these books that we're reading, Srimad Bhagavatam, his name was Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada. He was a highly evolved being, exactly as we're reading here. He was a person who could take you back to God because he himself was in that place. You cannot take someone where you are not. You've got to be at that level of consciousness. Then you can take somebody with you. At this point, then Prahlad became silent, and his father threw him off his lap and onto the ground. Indignant and angry, his reddish eyes like molten copper, Hiranyakashipu said to his servants, "Take this boy away from me. He deserves to be killed. Kill him as soon as possible. This boy is the killer of my brother, for he has given up his family to engage in the service of the enemy Vishnu like a menial servant." At the age of 5, he has given up his affectionate relationship with his father and mother. So now he's accusing Prahlad of giving up his relationship with his father and mother. Therefore, he is certainly untrustworthy. If a limb of one's body is poisoned by disease, it should be amputated so that the rest of the body may live. Similarly, even if one's own son, if unfavorable, must be rejected, although born of one's own body. He appears to be a friend, but is actually an enemy, because I cannot control him. Therefore, he must be killed by all means. Watch what he's saying. He's an enemy because I cannot control him. How often have we turned against someone just because we could not control them? How often have we hated someone? How often have we broken up with someone? How often have we fought with someone because we could not control them, because they wouldn't do things the way we thought they should? Or they did the things we thought they should not do. And how often have we been upset with them? And how often have we been angry and resentful? Why? Because we're trying to control what others should and should not do. And why are we trying to control them? Because we think they're supposed to do things the way we believe they should. And in this case, the father wants his son to behave a certain way, and his son won't. He won't be an atheist. He won't reject God. And so he says he wants him to be killed by all means. So now his Hiranyakashipu's Rakshas demon servants, really cruel characters, began striking the tender parts of Prahlad's body, the boy, 5-year-old boy Prahlad's body, with their tridents. They had fearful faces, sharp teeth, and reddish coppery beards and hair, and they appeared extremely threatening. Making a tumultuous sound, they shouted, "Chop him up! Chop him up! Chop him up! Pierce him!" And they kept striking him. All the while, Prahlad sat silently, meditating upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Their weapons had no tangible effect upon Prahlad because he was a devotee, undisturbed by material conditions and fully engaged in meditating upon and serving the Supreme, who is unchangeable and cannot be realized by the material senses, and who is the soul of the entire universe. When all their attempts were futile, Hiranyakashipu, being most fearful, began contriving other means to kill him. Now, at this point, Hiranyakashipu is getting afraid. He's getting like, what the hell? They're doing all these things, they're not able to kill him. So then they tried to kill Prahlad by throwing him beneath the feet of big elephants, throwing him among huge, fearful snakes, a whole nest of fearful snakes, big ones, employing destructive spells, hurling him from the top of a hill, conjuring up illusory tricks, administering poison. Yes, they gave him poison, starving him, exposing him to severe cold, winds, fire, and water, or throwing heavy stones to crush him. Let's see, we've got some pictures out here that might help you see more of what's going on. So that's the boy Prahlad on his father's lap. Hiranyakashipu is the father. That's his Rakshasa or demon servants trying to kill Prahlad, and they're not able to while he sits there in meditation. And that's Prahlad being put into a den of snakes and vipers. And that's where they've thrown Prahlad off a cliff. And Krishna, Vishnu, is there to hold him so that no harm would come to this little boy. I think you get the idea. Prahlad was protected by God. When Hiranyakashipu found that he could not in any way harm Prahlad, he was in great anxiety about what to do next. He thought, despite all my endeavors, the boy cannot be killed. Indeed, he saved himself by his own powers without being affected in the least. Although he's merely a child, he is completely fearless. Just as a dog's curved tail can never be straightened, I am unable to make him forget the connection with his master, Vishnu. His strength, the boy's strength, is unlimited, and he has no fear of my punishments. He appears immortal. Therefore, because of my enmity toward him, I shall die. Hiranyakashipu then became very morose and silent. He became bereft of bodily luster and walked with his face downward. The teachers of Prahlad, Shanda and Amarka, the two sons of Shukracharya, tried to remind Hiranyakashipu of his power. They said, Master, when you move your eyebrows, everyone trembles. Without any assistance, you have conquered the entire universe. Prahlad is nothing but a child and cannot be a cause of anxiety. After all, his bad or good qualities have no value. Arrest him with ropes so that he will not flee in fear. We will continue to instruct him, and in time he will change in his intelligence. There is no cause for anxiety. Hiranyakashipu agreed to their advice, and the boy's education continued. So basically, they're going to subject him to brainwashing now, and they're going to try to change the way he is. When the teachers went home to attend to their household affairs, Prahlad's fellow students would call him to play. I think at this point, I'm going to skip over to, I think we'll just let it go. And we'll let you chew on what we've had so far. Next time, we'll talk about what happened next in this story. It's going to go on for a couple of more episodes. So do please watch the earlier one if you haven't, to understand the deeper significance of who is this father, Hiranyakashipu, and why he was the way he was. All right? Please do that. And now, let's take a look at some of your questions. I'd love to hear what you've got to say. Celie writes, I agree that vibratory energy surpasses space and time. Thank you for fine-tuning differences of the demigods and goddesses and other cosmic beings. Actually, the energy of a person or of a place or of everything surpasses the physical. Energy is a higher vibration than matter. You see, we're conditioned to look at things in a physical way. We look at the objects of the world, we look at the people. But what is behind that person, what is behind that, whether it's a food or it's a person or it's a place, is their energy. And that's very important. The kind of people you hang out with, the energy of those people. The association you have is very important. And either you are a generator of that energy or you're going to be a receiver of the energy. So it's very important to understand this, because as you go about your life and you go about the world, are you there getting impacted by everybody's energy? Or are you a generator of energy and thereby bringing your energy into the world? See, if your energy is weak, you're likely to be impacted by everybody else. But if your energy is strong, especially your spiritual energy is strong, then your radiance, your bliss, your peace, your vibrance will be of great impact in the world. And this is what we can practically do, is work on building our own energy and bring that into the world. That is the greatest gift you can bring to the world, to the people you know. What about the other things? Any other questions? Any of you on Zoom or YouTube that have any questions? And if not, well, if you're watching the replay later on YouTube, then please write your questions there. I'd love to hear from you, and I will definitely reply. Thank you so much for being here. We have something. Seems here on this planet we experience fundamental cosmic order. Explain yourself, Seely. What does that mean? What do you mean by fundamental cosmic order? One of the things we do experience out here is a move from order to disorder constantly, order to chaos. If you just leave things alone, you just leave your house alone for a little while, chaos starts to happen. Leaves will come in, dust will come in, insects will come in. And then you're cleaning up. You're always cleaning up stuff. You're always bringing order into chaos. It's the nature of this world. It's always moving towards some kind of entropy, always moving to some kind of chaos. And then we spend our whole life trying to clean up that mess, trying to make things better. All right, I'll give it another moment if there's any last thing here anyone's got. Otherwise, thank you for being here. And I look forward to seeing you next week. And remember, if you haven't watched the earlier episodes, please do. They're all there on my channel. And we're going to continue with the story of Prahlad the next time. There is a lot to it. There's really a lot to learn. And there's a lot in the wisdom of this young boy that we can learn from. All right. Take care. See you next week. Bye. Hare Krishna.